This place suits you perfectly. Huh? A doghouse? After finally arriving following a 3-hour flight and a long journey from the airport, my sister Olivia laughed and pointed to a corner of the garden. The tables are all full, but this is perfect for you, don't you think? What stood there was a log cabin-style doghouse, decorated quite lavishly. A bone-shaped sign with a dog's name carved into it hung at the entrance. My mother was laughing at this too. Feeling like garbage, I quietly whispered to myself, I'll no longer try to be loved by these people. This morning my son and I had boarded a plane to attend my sister's birthday party. We keep our living situation today. Okay? I said softly but seriously to Lucas and Tyler as they fastened their seatbelts in the back seat. Yeah, I understand, 13-year-old Lucas nodded, while 10-year-old Tyler murmured, we just need to act normal, right? A 3-hour flight, then another 40 minutes by taxi from the airport. The beautifully trimmed lawns and carefully arranged trees outside the car window cleared that this place is an upscale residential area. Within the gated community stood homes that looked like they had stepped out of architecture magazines, with my sister's house being particularly eye-catching among them. I placed a white paper bag on my knee. Inside were homemade lavender cookies and a hand-drawn card. Perhaps not suitable for a party in a mansion worth tens of millions, but they were gifts prepared with all my heart. The taxi slowly came to a stop, and the driver turned around. Is this the right place? Yes, thank you. I took a deep breath and opened the door. The strong midsummer sunlight reflected off the glamorous garden decorations, burning my eyes. White and gold balloons, chandelier-like lights, and the murmur of dressed-up people. Music played faintly in the background. As we walked along the path to the entrance, Tyler tugged at my sleeve. Mom, are you nervous? I smiled. Just a little. But it's okay. We're family after all. When I rang the bell, my mother appeared at the door. She simply said, "So you came," and directed her gaze not at me, but at the children. Then my sister Olivia appeared, perfectly dressed in a designer gown, with an ideal smile fixed on her lips. Well, you actually came. That 3-hour flight must have been exhausting. Your dress is casual. To those words that could be taken as either sarcasm or a joke, I simply nodded with a smile. I baked cookies for you all. They're lavender-flavored, I said, offering the bag. My sister pinched it with her fingertips and peered inside, as if appraising it. Well. Cheers rose from inside the house. Unfamiliar guests were raising their glasses and enjoying the party with smartphones in hand. Please come in, or I would say, but the living room is already full. We've prepared a special place for you all. Mom, can you show them? My mother nodded with an unnatural smile. Follow me. It's outside, but it's in the shade, so it's cool. For a moment, something just didn't feel right. But seeing the children exchanging anxious glances, I swallowed that feeling. It's okay. Let's go. At this point, I still didn't know. Outside in the garden, the green lawn stretched out under the midsummer sun. A bar counter with a tent, guests chatting with champagne in hand. Flower petals floated in the marble fountain, and jazz music played softly in the background. This way, my mother said, pointing to a corner of the garden. A small wooden structure stood slightly off to the side of the party, resembling a quaint log cabin. But at its entrance hung a bone-shaped plate with Bruno written on it. Is this? As Lucas began to speak, my mother casually opened the door. It's in the shade, and there's a nice breeze. It's a quiet, peaceful place perfect for you all. It was a doghouse. Inside was an old cushion and a bed with bite marks from stuffed toys. Metal food and water bowls sat in the corner. You're joking, right? I said in a hushed voice, and my sister Olivia appeared behind me. Sorry, but all the other seats are full, but don't worry. This suits you perfectly. The children must be used to it, right? The leftovers. My sister handed pet food dishes to my two sons, 13-year-old Lucas and 10-year-old Tyler. Inside were cold roast beef and the remains of gravy sauce clinging to the corner of the plate. Some of the guests looked over, but no one said anything. They just exchanged glances for a moment, then returned to their drinks. Tyler tugged at my sleeve, suppressing his voice. "Mom, am I supposed to eat here?" I put on a smile, but my lips were trembling. "It's okay, just for a little while. Then we'll go home." Reluctantly, I had the children sit in front of the doghouse. Lucas picked up his fork without saying anything, looking down at the paper plate. But his hand was shaking. Tyler reached for the bread but quickly put it down. "Why do we have to eat in a place like this?" I couldn't answer that question. I just placed my hands gently on their backs and closed my eyes. Music and laughter echoed in the distance. An elegant cake stand stood in the middle of the garden, where men and women laughed together under the chandelier's glow. Olivia in her white dress behaved like the perfect hostess, while my mother watched proudly. "Mom, those people are looking at us," Lucas whispered. When I looked up, several guests were staring at us, but their gazes held neither sympathy nor righteousness, only a cold indifference, a desire not to get involved. Tyler murmured softly, "Did we do something wrong?" I held his small hand and hugged him tightly. "No, you haven't done anything wrong. You are the most wonderful boys." As I said this, I desperately held back my tears. But tears fell from Tyler's eyes, one after another. I can't take this anymore." He dropped the fork on the grass and clung to me, his small shoulders trembling. Lucas also frowned and said quietly, looking away, "Putting us in a place like this, those people aren't family." I gently stroked both their heads. I didn't know what words could heal this wound. Just watching my children hanging their heads on the cold grass, something inside my chest broke with a sound. "Let's go home," I said. Lucas looked up. "Really?" "Yes, we don't need to stay here anymore." As I stood up and was about to get our bag, I heard laughter from a distance. In the center of the garden, Olivia and my mother were talking with someone. They seemed to be enjoying themselves, as if they had already forgotten about relegating us to the doghouse. "Do you think they really meant it when they said suitable place?" Lucas murmured. I nodded quietly. "Yes. But their idea of what suits us has nothing to do with our worth." I went back to the living room to get our bag. I passed several guests on the way, but no one tried to make eye contact. No one stopped me. No one called out to me. I picked up the handbag I had left in the room and went back outside. The children were already standing. Tyler's eyes were red, but he had wiped away his tears and was facing forward. "Mom, let's get out of here. We can hold our heads high, right?" I smiled proudly. "Of course, we have nothing to be ashamed of." It happened just as we were about to walk toward the gate. My sons and I were crossing the pathway, approaching the entrance to the party venue. "Sorry I'm late." A man shouted as he rushed into the entrance carrying a large bouquet. He still held his smartphone in one hand, still on a call. His figure, showing signs of haste and sweat, rushed toward the venue. I tried to move out of the way, but it was too late. "I'm sorry." From the impact of him bumping into me without noticing, my bag fell from my hand. "Are you okay?" "I'm really sore." At that point, his movement stopped. While looking at my fallen bag, he slowly raised his face and froze as he met my eyes. "Eliza?" At that moment, I clearly saw his face too. "James?" Just then, my sister appeared from behind with my mother, her dress hem swirling. "James, we've been waiting for you, you're late." Sorry, Olivia. "I just finished work, and there was traffic from the airport." Saying this, James handed the bouquet he was holding to my sister. "Here, with the peonies you like? I'm glad I made it in time." As my sister accepted it with a smile, James glanced at me and continued speaking. I'm really surprised. I had no idea Eliza would be at this party. At those words, I felt a jolt. What? You know Eliza? Of course. In fact, it would be unusual to find someone who doesn't know her. James said this while returning his gaze to me, smiling a little sheepishly before clearly stating, I never expected to meet you in a place like this. CEO, it's been a while. James took my hand with an expression that couldn't hide his surprise and delight. At those words, my sister's eyes widened, and my mother whispered, CEO? James turned around and answered casually, I worked with Eliza once. I never expected to see her here today. Olivia's face visibly stiffened. What do you mean by worked with? James said with a puzzled look. Ha, you didn't know? She's the founder of Heritage Spice? Her YouTube channel has over 1 million subscribers, and she's now a charismatic figure in the seasoning industry. No way. Olivia gasped in disbelief. You're joking. You're from that company? James added with a bright smile. The spice set I received at last month's lecture was very popular with the restaurant chefs. I smiled awkwardly. Thank you. I never expected to meet in a place like this. Several guests who had been chatting nearby perked up their ears. A woman tilting her champagne glass whispered, Heritage, you mean that one? You're the CEO? My mother quietly asked. I took a deep breath. There was no point in hiding it anymore. Yes, I am. Tyler squeezed my hand tightly, and Lucas lifted his face and looked at me proudly. James, who had been watching us intently, suddenly turned to my sister. Olivia, you knew Eliza? My sister's face stiffened for a moment. But perhaps sensing the gazes around her, she reluctantly answered, She's my sister. James's eyes widened. Your sister? This is the first time I've heard you have a sister. It wasn't worth mentioning. My sister's voice carried a trace of bitterness. But James didn't seem satisfied with that answer. He turned his gaze back to me and said with a smile, By the way, your new product line this season is being talked about as revolutionary in the industry. I think your talent for blending spices is genuine. It's truly an honor to meet you today, as a fellow professional. Somewhat surprised by James's straightforward words, I smiled naturally. Thank you. I'm happy to hear you say that. My voice was quiet, but those words were tinged with the pride and relief of someone who had stopped hiding. At that moment, a clear murmur began to spread among the guests who had been eavesdropping. Eliza is from that Heritage? Unbelievable. To think the actual person would be in a place like this. Wait, isn't she the woman who was just at the doghouse? I could see whispers being exchanged as glances were cast in our direction, spreading like ripples throughout the entire venue. I straightened my back and gently placed my hands on the children's shoulders. We'll be leaving now. When I said this, James nodded slightly. Before you go, may I take a photo with you? I want to show it off to my staff. Tyler and Lucas looked at each other and smiled. That's great, Mom. With a small smile, I wrapped my arms around the children's shoulders. Of course. It would be my honor, I replied. He took out his smartphone and stood beside us with a natural smile. In front of the camera, Lucas and Tyler also pressed their shoulders together and smiled brightly. The world was slowly beginning to change. Excuse me, may I have your attention for a moment? James's voice rang out clearly amid the garden's murmurs. He put his smartphone back in his pocket and slowly stepped forward. There stood the guests, still frozen as they tried to grasp the situation, along with my confused sister and mother. Since we have this opportunity, allow me to introduce someone, James said with a smile. This is Eliza, founder and CEO of Heritage Spice, and also a YouTuber with over 1 million subscribers. At that moment, the atmosphere of the party completely changed. A woman holding a champagne glass tilted it in surprise, and men sitting on sofas widened their eyes and stood up. "Excuse me, my daughter is a huge fan. Could I possibly get your autograph?" I hesitated for a moment, but then nodded gently. "Of course. Thank you." Watching this, Tyler exclaimed, "Mom, you're amazing," while Lucas proudly puffed out his chest. "She's my mom. She's really amazing." Hearing this, another guest approached shyly. "I always watch your YouTube, and your bento recipes are super helpful." From behind them, a middle-aged man called out, "My wife is a huge fan. She watches your videos every day and always says her videos make cooking enjoyable." Then a young woman, clutching her smartphone, said with a smile, "I'm looking forward to your next Sweets episode." Everyone at my workplace shares and watches them together. Before I knew it, people had begun to gather around me, one by one. People who knew my content, not just my name. I responded politely and carefully to each person, as if it were perfectly natural for me to be standing there. But my sister's and mother's expressions began to change visibly. "I never heard about this. Not at all. You never said a word about any of this," my sister whispered in a trembling voice. My mother stood speechless with shock. I looked them straight in the eyes. There was no anger or hatred in my gaze. Only a quiet determination resided there. "Do you think you would have believed me if I had told you?" My mother couldn't answer. Her mouth remained open as her eyes darted around. "You've always looked down on me. When I said I loved cooking, you laughed and said, 'At least you're good at housework.' When I got divorced, you treated it like proof of a failed life, and assumed that not being a full-time employee meant I was unstable and pitiful. I thought you invited me for your birthday, but you led us to a doghouse. That's because you truly believed that's what suits me, right?" Each word was infused with accumulated pain. "You just didn't want to accept that even a divorced single mother can create a life to be proud of with enough effort. Because if I were happy, it would destroy the meaning of everything you've done." I looked at my mother and sister once more. For the first time, their expressions showed genuine distress. As I looked at my mother and sister once more, James, who had been silently listening to this exchange from a short distance away, gently added, "When I first encountered Eliza's products, I felt not just the visual beauty, but a conviction behind the flavors. I had always wanted to know who created them." James continued as he slowly approached us. "Today, hearing your words, I understand clearly where that passion comes from." His words were quiet, but each one was straightforward and made the air tremble. And then, looking not at me but at my sister and mother, he said, "Olivia, if you had truly seen her instead of looking down on her, you could have noticed before anyone else. Eliza hasn't merely succeeded. She was repeatedly ignored and looked down upon, yet she never gave up and believed in herself, and as a result, built her current position." Hearing his words, I felt a quiet warmth ignite deep in my chest. The comfort and warmth of knowing that someone had been watching quietly seeped into my heart. "Stop it!" My sister cried out with a voice like a scream. "Everyone's being deceived. This person, she's been hiding it from us all along." James firmly replied, "She wasn't hiding it. You all just never let her speak, did you?" Silence fell. It was broken by Lucas's words. "Mom has been working hard for us ever since she separated from Dad." His voice was quiet but had a firm core. From early morning until late at night, she filmed videos, edited them, and made test batches of seasonings over and over. Despite all that, she still made lunches for me and Tyler. Even though it was tough, she was always smiling. I saw it all clearly. Tyler also nodded slightly beside him. "I love you, Mom." At their words, I felt a warmth deep in my chest. More than any applause or praise, those words from my children were the most important validation for me. Unable to hold back, I gently pulled Lucas and Tyler close and embraced them tightly. Thank you, Mom is truly happy to have you both. Several guests who had been watching this scene slowly but surely began to applaud. Eventually it spread, expanding throughout the center of the party, as if celebrating a new guest of honor. Eliza, do you have plans for a recipe book? I'll definitely buy it. Looking forward to seeing your next video. Among the guests laughing and saying such things, there was no longer a place for my sister and mother. I quietly said, "Thank you, but we'll be taking our leave now." Several guests looked disappointed, but no one tried to stop us. After experiencing her dignity, they understood this was only natural. I headed toward the gate with my children. I took one last look at the venue. We have a place to return to. Saying this, I took Lucas and Tyler's hands and left the venue. In the blazing afternoon sun, there was no hesitation or pain in my back. Only quiet pride and certain hope. This incident was quickly spread and became a topic on social media the following day. Posts about the woman in the doghouse was actually the CEO of a famous seasoning brand went viral, with videos and photos being shared one after another. Many warm messages were sent to me. Because of this, I began to receive far more attention than I had ever imagined. Publishing contract offers and speaking requests from companies and schools came one after another, and my days became busier than ever before. My sister and mother must have been at a loss for words upon discovering that the family failure they had looked down on was actually receiving great trust and recognition from the public. However, this wasn't a case of me gaining attention because I was once degraded. I felt that my worth had been there all along from the beginning. It had simply, at last, come to the world's attention. 3 months later, we moved to a new home. It was a modern, open house standing on a small hill in the suburbs. From the glass-walled living room, you could see the spacious garden and the lush forest beyond it. The large dining table was filled with an array of colorful dishes. It was a carefully prepared homemade menu, including prototypes for my newly launched second brand, Root Flame. "Mom, these pickles are so delicious," Tyler shouted with his cheeks full, while Lucas poured sparkling water instead of wine into his glass and smiled. "Can I lead the toast?" Just then, a smartphone rang. The screen displayed my aunt's name. "Eliza? Do you have a moment?" "Oh, yes. What is it?" A voice from the other end of the phone was mixed with a sigh. "I got a call from your sister the other day. She said she couldn't get in touch with you." I didn't say anything, holding my phone tighter in my hand. "She asked me if I could somehow contact you. She's been saying she wants to talk when the time is right, but I'm sure she doesn't know what to say anymore." I exhaled briefly. "There's nothing left to talk about." "Don't say that. Your sister seems to be regretting a lot of things now." "It seems Olivia's engagement with James was broken off too. Can't you somehow start over as a family? Their regret is their own problem. For me, that day was the last. I can't imagine wanting to be family after being treated like that." On the other end of the phone, my aunt fell silent, as if at a loss for words. I continued quietly. "I finally found my place. So I don't plan to go back. Rather than clinging to the past, I want to live with people who truly value me." "I see. That makes sense. I can't force you." "I'm sorry." I lowered my eyes slightly. After a moment of silence, my aunt said in a somewhat softer voice, "But you know, Eliza, the world is surprisingly fair. People who are watching really see. So hold your head high." I smiled slightly. "Thank you. Don't worry. I won't shrink away anymore, no matter what happens." With that, I hung up the phone. When I turned around, Lucas and Tyler were running around in the garden, laughing with water guns in their hands. Looking at that casual scene, I quietly thought, this moment right here is the most precious and truly happy. About a year later, a letter arrived in the mailbox. On the back were written the names of my sister and mother. I took it, silently threw it in the trash without opening the seal, without surprise or hesitation. I'm no longer weak enough to be swayed by words written there. That night, laughter filled the dining room of our home. As Lucas and Tyler blew out the candles on the homemade chocolate cake, I smiled amid loud applause. James stood in the kitchen, putting the finishing touches on a special herb roast for me. After breaking off his engagement with Olivia, he became an advisor for my brand, and we met many times during photo shoots and product development. His sincere approach to cooking and his honest attitude at all times gradually allowed me to open my heart. While building trust as business partners, a natural bond began to form between us. It wasn't about competing or taking from each other, but about building something together. It was completely different from what I once knew as family. Warm lighting and the presence of people with whom I could truly feel at ease. That was my family now. Once I was obsessed with blood ties and desperately wanted to be loved. No matter how coldly I was treated, I convinced myself it was because there was something lacking in me. But now I can clearly say, my mistake was entrusting my worth to others' evaluations. In this past year, I've clearly learned. Instead of trying to gain the love of people who don't accept you, if you create your own place, the right people will come. When I chose and built that place, relationships full of trust and respect naturally gathered around me. Now I have a space where I can be myself without having to flatter anyone or fear rejection. I leaned back on the sofa, listening to the children's laughter, and quietly closed my eyes. I no longer need to live to meet someone else's expectations. I live my life. And that is not something given by someone else, but something I choose with my own hands. I suddenly remembered myself from a year ago. That day when I endured humiliation in front of my children at the doghouse. But without that day, I wouldn't have come this far. It was a life built by my own hands, filled with pride and dignity. Then Lucas said to me, "Hey Mom, I think I might actually like that day when we were in the doghouse, just a little bit." I looked at him in surprise. Why? Because without that day, I don't think we would have become this strong. I looked at my son and slowly nodded. Yes, that day wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. My story is no longer about being leftovers.